President of the Canadian Pacific Railway that was responsible for the railway promised by the first Prime Minister of Canada, John Macdonald, that it would terminate in Vancouver rather than Port Moody. And Van Horn insisted the name of the city, which was the Granville, be changed from Granville to Vancouver. So these are scenes from the Rockies as she takes the first train, which arrived here in 1887. We're looking at Brockton Point in Stanley Park, right? You see the 9 o'clock gun? You see the point itself where there was a lighthouse just beyond the very... See where the bus is going right now? There's a little structure, that's a 9 o'clock gun. Right where that bus was is where the Portuguese community lived. And a painter by the name of, what's the name on that there? Edgar Bloomfield in 1906 painted the houses in Stanley Park, called Squatters Cove. You can get this from the BC Archive, which actually shows about a small community with 4 houses on it. I'll pass that around for you to see. Douglas, the first, went from being the chief factor of the Hudson Bay Company, the first governor of BC. And Douglas wrote to Queen Victoria, and was scared that the population increasing from 300 to 30,000 in 3 months. It was chaos. And the paddle wheelers came from San Francisco to Victoria, from Victoria to the Fraser River. So he sends a dispatch to Queen Victoria, and she sends 150 sappers, engineers. And they established the capital at New Westminster on the Fraser River, because they're scared about the Americans. This area is too open to attack. They want to be up the river in case there's trouble. So New Westminster is the capital. There's nothing here in Vancouver. Till about 1862, when a couple of English immigrants, sometimes known as the Three Greenhorns, established a bricklayer's claim right about where the Marine Hotel is, right behind us. So then there's the gold rush in 1858, and again, that's when it's changes, and that's when I think these Portuguese start coming. And Portuguese Joe Silvey, who see here, who married Chief Capilano's granddaughter, is thought to be the first Portuguese to build this house by Brockton Point, where he fishes for herring and sells it at $1 a barrel to passing ships. And his daughter, the first child born in Vancouver of Portuguese heritage, her father Joe Silvey, her mother Chief Capilano's granddaughter, Elizabeth Walker, was born here in Stanley Park in about 1864. And
first child born of European,
yes,
here
in Vancouver. Yes, yeah, first child. And in the 30s, thank Major Matthews, the city archivist. He used to visit him, and Major Matthews would record his conversations with her. A lot of the information that's used in that film, Portuguese Joe, is based on some of her conversations.
Is that 1930s?
The 30s, right up to about 40s. She died in the early 40s. So she told Major Matthews, my father, Joe Silvey Simmons, was from the island of Pieka in the Azores. Of course, there is no island of Pieka, but there is the island of Pico. And we think we have found the village in Pico where Portuguese Joe came from. So other Portuguese follow Portuguese Joe Silvey to Brockton Point. Peter Smith, as I told you, the whaler, daughters Mary the Costa. He marries an Aboriginal. He also lives over here at Brockton Point in one of the houses. And Gregorio Fernandez, who was the first coffee roaster in BC and the first store owner in Vancouver, also was here early on. And his 17-year-old nephew, Joseph Gonçalves, comes from Madeira in 1874 and to look after his ailing uncle. And Joe Silva is said to have given his house, Silvey, to Gonçalves in 1874. So Joe Silvey is gone by 1874. His first wife dies, and he marries Lucy, a 15-year-old Sechelt Indian. The reason we know a lot of history about what happened here is that in 1923, one of the sons of that 17-year-old Gonçalves, who comes in 1874, goes to City Hall to get a permit to build an addition to his house. And City Hall says, no, you can't have a permit. And they fine him. And the city of Vancouver moves to evict the squatters, quote, that were living there. And to defend themselves, they had to prove that they were living here for 60 years. So the court goes to trial. We have the decision of the court, but we also have a record of a lot of the evidence, because the case went to the Supreme Court of Canada. So because it went to the Supreme Court of Canada, they had to prepare a record. It pays to be a lawyer sometimes. And all the evidence that was taken by these people. For example, Peter Smith was too ill to testify. So they came to his house here to take his testimony. It goes like this: your name's Peter Smith. Yes. Where were you born? Right here. What was your father's name? Peter Smith. Where was your father from? Portugal. So, and in some instances, that's how we find out about the Portuguese in early BC. For example, Enos Lake and Enos Creek in the New Spain today is named after João Ignacio, who was from Santa Maria, who died in Victoria in about 1826. And there's many others that sometimes we have to dig to find out their origins. So the case goes to the Supreme Court of Canada because they had to prove that Portuguese Joe Silvy had been here since 1855. And a 100-year-old Aboriginal person by the name of Abraham testifies that he had been here since 1855. But the trial judge says cannot rely on the testimony of Aboriginal people. They're not reliable, they're liars. So they lost. It was appealed to the Court of Appeal of British Columbia, and in a very progressive judgment, I forget the name of the judge, says no, there's nothing wrong with the evidence of Aboriginal people. It should be accepted, and the squatters, quote unquote, win. The city of Vancouver appeals to the Supreme Court of Canada, and one line, the Supreme Court of Canada says, appeal granted. And they evict the settlers who had lived here 60 years. And if I was a descendant of one of those settlers, I'd take the city of Vancouver to court today. There's no monument in Stanley Park. The children, Peter Smith was unlucky, his wife died, his children wound up in residential schools, a couple of his children died. They are buried there. They are buried there. There are weddings there of these Portuguese settlers. Portuguese Joe Silvy was extraordinary. As soon as more European people started coming to Vancouver, he left, because he wanted to protect his family against the racism, open racism. One thing striking about the early Portuguese settlers is how well they got along with the Aboriginal people. They all married Aboriginal women, they integrated well. Portuguese Joe Silvy, his daughter said, could play the violin, the mandolin. Seeing the chamarite yesterday from Pico, I recall that one of the relatives of Portuguese Joe Silvy said that the father used to teach him to dance with square kerchiefs over their head. I wonder if that's some version of the chamarita. There's so much work to be done. I hope that, what I hope is that the younger generation, second, third generation, can start doing some PhDs, some research that needs to be done.